So we're going to turn now to our panel discussion. I think everybody on this call, certainly anyone affiliated with these organizations, knows that organizing doesn't look the same in every kind of community or in every part of the state. So as we tell you to go out and organize about this issue, and we've given you some of the information and the tools and the language, we really thought it'd be helpful to have this panel of experts talk about best practices in how to organize in general in various different kinds of communities. So I want to introduce the full panel, and then I'm going to ask each panelist to talk a little bit about your organization and the work you do. First, we have Jamal Watkins. He's the Senior Vice President of Strategy and Advancement for the NAACP. We have Kim Bobo, who's the Executive Director of Virginia Interfaith. And we have Eduardo Zelaya, who is the Regional Lead Organizer of CASA, Virginia. So Jamal, why don't we start with you?
Thank you, Liz. I'm going to share my screen. And as we all know, my organization is the NAACP, this organization. So I bring you greetings on behalf of the NAACP, our President and CEO, Derek Johnson, our Chair, Leon Russell, Vice Chair, Karen Boykin-Towns, and our entire team. I'm excited to be in this space, and I'm grateful to President Barnett, Gillian, Executive Director Love, and the team in Virginia who are constantly fighting forward to make sure that our voices are lifted up. What I'm going to do is do a snapshot of a couple of things. One is to frame out how the national NAACP, in partnership with our state conferences, including Virginia, are looking at redistricting, and then do a teaser of a part of how we're framing out the approach of really anchoring this in racial equity and inclusion. And so as an organization, for those of you who are in the field, our leaders, our presidents, state conference folks, folks who are on political action committees, our president and CEO through our national board of directors presented a few weeks ago his vision for our goals. And two that are really important out of the five, all five are important, but the two that stand out for this conversation are that we are one NAACP and that we have a strategic alignment around the work we do in all 50 states, the District of Columbia, Japan, Korea, wherever we have an NAACP unit and presence. And one of the things that's really important, and I saw Daquan lift this up in the chat, is that we are nonpartisan. We have a C3 and a C4 infrastructure, but we're not blind. And so in the space of dealing with redistricting, we are clear that our theory of the case is rooted in something very simple, that people plus policy advocacy is our approach, and that is how we make life better for the Black community, for the communities we serve, for all communities, and for all Americans. And so when we think about redistricting through the lens of the Fair Maps objective, if you were to take a step back, you've heard some great information. Our real objectives are rooted in a few principles. One is that maps are drawn equitably and inclusively, and that it ensures all voters of color have an opportunity to elect a candidate of their choice. Very simple. We also are really clear on the notion of changing the rules where possible, defending the rules where necessary, so litigation is really a cornerstone, and then advocating and agitating to shape the debate, create a political demand, and push the right narrative, which you got a lot of that information just now from Suzanne, our friends from Common Cause. When we think about redistricting as a focus area, and you all will get a longer deck of these slides, I'm gonna go through just the highlights. We're focusing in on 5 key areas nationally. And this is really broken down categorically, that we're thinking about the redistricting enterprise system. So you all saw the map of Virginia and how it's broken out in terms of your commission and the hearings process. That's understanding the system itself and how things work. But centering people and communities to engage really matters, and that's what we're doing today. And you all will continue to do things like systems evolution, unity maps. You know, there's targeting, and you see Virginia is one of the states that we are focusing in on. But then there's the notion of protecting communities of color and disadvantaged communities. So I'm going to go a little bit deeper on the notion of the Voting Rights Act, but we're thinking through how we protect people of color and communities of color in this process. But then there's the notion of technical support and more training. So glad to see that we are looking at tools like Redistrictor and Representable, but we also have in our back pocket the ability to provide enterprise solutions like Maptitude and ArcGIS for those of you who want to go even deeper. And so the national office and Tony Fairfax, who actually is with Census Channel LLC based in Virginia, is helping us lead that process. And we'll continue to follow up to determine what your needs are. And then, of course, the communications bucket to make sure that we are shaping and creating the narrative that makes sense. Now, all of this is wrapped around a simple concept of if we do these 4 things, we'll get it right. Continue to do education, continue to provide trainings, continue to do advocacy, and continue to litigate where necessary. And so this is a part of our ecosystem. Now, I want to step back and also point out that we are in partnership with a whole lot of folks. So Suzanne, for example, is a part of Team Common Cause, who we work with through the Charge Hub, which includes other organizations like State Voices, Center for Popular Democracy, Mi Familia Vote. We're part of the State Infrastructure Fund, which includes MALDEF, Asian Americans Advancing Justice, Southern Echo, and we're a part of a thing called the Racial Equity Anchors, which includes Urban League and Unidos and API Health Forum and National Congress of American Indians and ESRI. And so there's a lot of groups we partner with nationally, at the state level and at the local level to make sure we're getting right. So if you get trainings or see things from some of these groups, just know that 9 times out of 10, we're playing together, communicating together, and working our angles to make sure that we get this right. So I'm going to pivot now to just do a snapshot of some of our framing around minority vote dilution, the Voting Rights Act, and communities of interest. But there are longer form trainings that we're offering through our legal team and through our non-legal team and through our partners that we're going to start promoting probably mid-July is when the next round of trainings will happen nationally that'll actually go deeper. We're thinking 2-3 hours of this type of training, even in the nuances. But for now, let's talk about minority vote dilution. And I think Virginians, you all are pretty much familiar with the notion of drawing fair maps. You can either draw maps that are fair and that actually represent proportionate to the electorate, or you can draw maps that are not fair. And you've seen this type of behavior happen through the notion of what is known as packing and cracking. And so when we think about packing and cracking, we understand that minority vote dilution is really problematic because this is a way to prevent communities of color from having a chance to elect candidates of their choice. And as we all know, and you've heard some of this information, districts are drawn based upon the cohesion of like-minded groups. So this game of drawing maps, if you will, is really about whose voices get lifted up and whose voices get shut out. So as an association, we're familiar with packing. You know that when you think about a community, say there are blue wards and gray wards, you can either draw communities in terms of maps in a way where folks are packed into one district, meaning communities of color are packed into one district, or they're drawn proportionately. You also have the notion of cracking, which is a way to break up the power of minority communities in terms of drawing maps where you really dilute the vote strength by what we call thinning out the district in terms of splitting or fracturing the community. And so when we think about this, we step back and say, what's our fix? What's our frame? It's the Voting Rights Act. Now we know that the Voting Rights Act has been gutted, Section 5 in particular, but Section 2 still stands. And it allows for us to think about redistricting through the lens of a few sort of frameworks. First, that when you're drawing maps, you have to look at the lens of, is the minority group sufficiently large and geographically concentrated to make up a majority district? I know that's a mouthful, and so there's lawyers and advocates who can work with you to really unpack this, but there's also the notion of, is the minority group a politically cohesive group? Meaning that the individuals make up a group that votes in similar patterns and that they usually vote for the same candidates. And so when you think about geography, for example, say Richmond, Virginia, you can look at the data and you will find that communities tend to vote a certain way and they have certain characteristics. You also think about it through the lens of, is the white majority usually voting together to defeat the minority preferred candidates? And then given the totality of all circumstances listed above, has this group less of an opportunity if the maps are drawn in a certain way? So we think about the protections of the Voting Rights Act. It's there to fight minority vote dilution. It's there to fight packing and cracking and really make sure that we have districts that are fair and that are inclusive, but actually reflect the communities that we live in. And there are other types of districts that fall into these categories like minority coalition districts, crossover districts, and influence districts, but wanted to lift up that we have a framework and we have some protection under the law that hopefully will prevent what we have seen historically as the packing and cracking in many communities across the country and in the state of Virginia. Now, I'm going to pivot a little bit and then turn it back over to the panel around this notion of communities of interest, because it's something that we are trying to focus in on in terms of independent redistricting. Now, community of interest is a neighborhood or a community or a group of people that have common policy concerns that would benefit from being maintained in a single district. And when you think about gerrymandering, look at this graphic. I think it actually tells the story. You don't want to draw, you want to draw your own community of interest map for redistricting so you don't get cut out of the meal, so that you don't get cut out of what's on the table. And when you think about this, this is the focus of a lot of our efforts around HR1 and S1. So you've seen recently our president and CEO meeting with Senator Joe Manchin about S1. This is to get policies at the federal level that will hopefully shift the paradigm so that gerrymandering in an extreme way doesn't happen. But locally, we can prevent this through the notion of communities of interest, helping to mobilize our communities and really fight intentional minority vote dilution. But I want to caution you all, and I'm picking on Virginia. Picking on Pennsylvania, didn't want to pick on Virginia with this graphic, but it's not a guaranteed fix because we still live in racially segregated communities. When you look at states like Virginia, there's pockets of Black folks that live in certain communities. You can go through Hampton Roads and find 160,000 Black folks who are clustered in certain communities. So if we do this community of interest frame, it could result in what we call intentional, and I'm going to say this again, unintentional, racialized splits, if you will. And so as we think about the notion of map drawing, we really want to make sure that we're being deliberate around how to center and ground our communities in a way where we're representing ourselves, but also thinking about the Voting Rights Act in Section 2. And so as I close, there's a lot more information that you can find online through our partnership with the Charge Hub at www.redistrictingcommunitycollege.com. You can email me, Jamal Watkins, jwatkins@naacpnet.org, and you'll get these slides. We'll be in communication, but in the coming weeks, we're going to continue to train, continue to nuance, and continue to fight for it together, because we know as all politics are local, all map drawing is local, and we want to find racial equity and inclusion between the lines. So I'm going to turn it back over to the panel so that we can continue this conversation. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. What a fantastic and in-depth look at so many of the issues surrounding redistricting. And I'm gonna pass it over now. Kim, I'm gonna put you on the spot and ask if you would talk to us about the Virginia Interfaith and what your organization does and what kind of communities you organize in.
Absolutely. So I'm Kim Bobo. I'm the director of the Virginia Interfaith Center for Public Policy. I think my colleague, Aisha Gilani Taylor, has joined us. She's my communications director, so she's here with us today. We are the oldest and strongest faith-based organization in Virginia. We have about 23 activists involved. We have 10 chapters. We have 120 congregations that work really closely with us with liaisons. And we have relationships with most of the major faith traditions in Virginia. So I thought I would talk first a little bit about why I love working with the faith community and why they're so fun to work with in terms of organizing. And then if you want to engage the faith community, where to start and what's important for the long haul. So the faith community is a structure for talking about values, right? We talk about values all the time. And so talking about equity and fairness, that really fits into how the faith community operates. So again, this question of equity and fairness in redistricting absolutely makes sense for a conversation in the faith community. Second, we have structure. I mean, we've got committees and social justice committees and women's committees, and some even have civic engagement committees. So, I mean, we have got structure in the faith community. So there's like something to work with. Thirdly, we have communication vehicles. Most congregations have a bulletin. Again, since not all congregations are meeting back in person, but Normally, if you're in person, like you have a bulletin that you can have bulletin inserts, you have a newsletter, you have emails, you have, used to be phone chain alerts, but now it's all email. But there are lots of ways to communicate with people through the faith community. Fourth, we have leaders and good speakers. It's, our folks are used to speaking in public. And so, if you're looking for folks, like our folks are good at that. Fifth, collectively, we're very diverse. We're rich, we're poor, we're white, we're Black, we're Latino. We are everything in Virginia. Now, usually not all within one congregation. Most congregations are still segregated. Only about 12% in the country are really multiracial congregations. So we're segregated as congregations, but collectively we are incredibly diverse. And Virginia is becoming more and more diverse. So you have every form of the Christian community. And the most diverse within itself is actually the Catholic community, because it's both whites and Latinos. So it's actually the most diverse denomination itself. But we have lots of Baptists. We have white Baptists and Black Baptists, and we have lots of Methodists and lots of Episcopalians and Church of God in Christ and AMEs and AME Zions. We got lots of Christians. We have a growing Muslim community. And in my experience around Virginia, the Muslim community is very eager to be engaged in this work and love to be in relationships with people. So it's a great time to be reaching out and engaging the Muslim community. And then Northern Virginia in particular is the fastest growing Jewish community in the country. So again, we are an incredibly growing, diverse faith community in Virginia. We are young and old. Now, as you probably can guess, a lot of congregations are concerned about not gathering enough young people. But having said that, there's still youth groups in most congregations. There's all sorts of faith groups in colleges and universities. So we are both young and old. We do things when we care about the issues and there are clear things for us to do. If it's kind of confusing, we won't do it. So, you have to make it pretty clear. And we are nonpartisan. Within a congregation, people are worried about causing fights, right? Keeping the congregation together and unified is a big deal. And so particularly among white congregations, they're very concerned about being nonpartisan. All congregations legally have to be nonpartisan. So you gotta emphasize that whenever you're working with them. Okay, so how to connect with the faith community. So in your community, first start out and see, is there a ministerial association of some sort or an interfaith group? Most larger communities have some sort of group. Now, they tend not to organize themselves into activities. They tend to be more of a kind of social networking kind of thing, but it's still a good way to find out who's in the community and connect with a lot of people. Secondly, it's just, who do you know, right? Who in your group is engaged in a congregation and how can they help tap you into them? Thirdly, what are the key denominations in our community? And really all you have to do is just kind of look. If anybody still has Yellow Pages, if you open the Yellow Pages to the religious organization section in the Yellow Pages, if there's this many Baptists and this many Catholics, there's a lot of Baptists in your community, right? You can easily look at it just through looking at the Yellow Pages. It's actually one thing where I don't know a comparable way to do it online these days, but again, you can figure out what are the structures. Generally speaking, if you want to work with a congregation, you're going to want to get the blessing of the clergy, and then you're going to want to work with a team of lay leaders. Now, there are some exceptions to that, but again, that's in general what you want to do. Partly because clergy are just so busy and they're called on all the time. And so you're going to get the most engagement if you get their blessing, but then they connect you with other lay leaders in the congregation. Then you got to think about why does redistricting matter to this congregation, and be able to talk about it. Again, I think the frames of equity and fairness work, but I think most people are not going to understand why this is going to matter. So you're going to have to spend a little bit of time helping people understand why it matters. And then you're going to have to give people suggestions of very concrete things they can do. And again, I do think it's important to try to think about what's an appropriate ask that people would feel comfortable with. And it's a classic organizing, right? It needs to be within the experience of the folks that you are working with, and hopefully outside the experience of the targets, right? I mean, that's kind of classic organizing. So in the faith community, what are we comfortable with? Well, we're comfortable with prayer services, and we're comfortable with studying things, and we're comfortable, anyway, you think about things that people feel comfortable with. I did a lot of labor support in my life, and I would always get some union organizer who'd never crossed the path of a religious organization in decades saying to me, "I think your people should picket the church on Easter Sunday." And I'd be like, no. That is not a good idea. We're not doing that. So you can't have people who aren't comfortable in the faith community or don't work in the faith community coming up with ideas for faith people to do, because they won't do them, because it has to be appropriate. On the other hand, when we were working on abolition of the death penalty, and we did an enormous amount of work on that, and I know many of you on this call sort of worked with us, and we worked with you on that. We were trying to make the connection between the death penalty and lynching in Virginia. And so our chapters around the Commonwealth did prayer vigils at lynching sites to try to make that connection. And then our job was to create sample prayer vigils, again, so it would be easy for people to do. They didn't have to write their own prayer vigil. They just had to pick up ours and do it. So again, think about things that you want people to do, and make it simple and very concrete. Because if you ask folks to get involved in the process, well, no one knows what that means, right? It's like that is not helpful, right? There is going to be a meeting at this place. Can you get 3 people to testify, and I will send you sample information you can testify with? Okay, then they can respond. So make it very, very simple. And again, as I mentioned earlier, the faith community has lots of good speakers, right? Again, it's not just the pastor, it's all these lay leaders who, have experience in leading worship and standing up in front of people. And so again, asking faith folks to speak in public settings, to open a prayer at things, right? That all makes sense. And most congregations also have music. They have choirs. And so ask the choirs to come do something at your event. Ask them to start out some event, with a song. So again, they've got resources, and they have buildings. So if you ever need to have a meeting, you should never pay for a space. You should always have a space in a religious institution, because they have buildings, and they're generally very open to do it. And depending on the congregation, they may also serve you some food along with it. So again, they like to be hospitable, they like to be welcoming, and so ask for that. Long term, working with the faith community is like working with anybody, right? It's fundamentally about relationships. And so getting to know people, getting to know how their congregations operate, what are the structures within the congregation, and longer term, getting to know the denominational structures within your community. Because there's not only the congregational structures, but there are denominational structures that can help you engage more congregations. And again, I think finally, to just, whenever you're engaging the faith community, if you can make it both fun, right, enjoyable, something they feel good about, right? We all like to have fun, and they'll want to come back the next time. but also that you're asking them to do things that make a difference and help people understand how what you're asking them to do makes sense in light of the overall strategy, and how whatever they're doing is going to be effective. Because they don't want to do things that aren't going to be helpful and effective. And so you've got to help explain how what you're asking them to do will really matter. I think working with the faith community is the best. And so I hope you will join me in engaging the faith community in all these social justice issues, and for you all engaging folks in redistricting. So thank you so much, Liz and Daquan, for your leadership in Virginia. And it's an exciting time. And I'm so glad we're going to have lots of people involved in the process for the first time ever.
Well, thank you so much,
so
Kim.
much.
And I must say, I know that Gillian is on our call, and she would definitely not want us to not thank you and the Virginia Interfaith Center for the partnership that you've had with many of our local and our local branches in our state conference, especially during the General Assembly session. And so it's really good when we have partners that are helping us do this work, because we can't do it alone.
In fact, my director of congregations just told all of our chapters, you must connect with the local NAACP. That's part of your mission. You must do that. So, so you might hear from some more of us.
Well, absolutely. And I will tell you, you will definitely hear the same echo in branches. I know President Barnett and Chair Gillian Conorton will definitely share that same sentiment with our branches in their next communication. Actually, we have a call with all of our PAC chairs tomorrow evening, and so that will definitely be mentioned. Gillian, did you want to say something briefly before we go to our next person?
Yes, I want to thank Kim for being on, and in Hampton Roads, we do work with the Interfaith.
I know, and Gillian, you're the best.
We do environmental justice, and on many levels of that we advocate. So, we really appreciate, the partnership and everything that you all are doing. So thank you so much for being on today.
My pleasure.
Excellent. Thank you. So I will turn it over back to Liz.
Sure. No, Kim, I just echo the thanks of everyone else. I would say that faith organizations are not the only ones with great speakers, clearly. I was moved and excited about all of your specific suggestions and your obvious wealth of knowledge on that. So thank you so much for sharing with that. And I am going to turn this over to Eduardo, who is our third panelist today. Eduardo, can you tell us about your work and CASA's work and the challenges and unique considerations for the organization work that you do?
Sure, good afternoon. First of all, I would like to thank all of the participants in this presentation. I'm very thrilled to be here learning from all of you and to share a little insight of what we do and what is going on in the grounds in our communities, right? And most importantly, to invite all of us to continue to get organized and to take action. I'm going to share my screen so I can present to you guys. Let me see. Sorry for the.
And before you share your screen, Eduardo, I think it might be helpful to also, if you could just share a little bit about your organization.
Right,
I think
okay. Yes.
that will be helpful as well.
Of course, of course. So who we are. So CASA, over 100,000 members across the state of Maryland, Virginia, and South Central Pennsylvania. CASA is the largest members-based Latino and immigrant organization in the Mid-Atlantic region. What's our vision? We envision a future where we stay in our own power, our families live free from discrimination and fear, and our diverse communities thrive as we work with our partners to achieve full human rights for all. What's our mission? Our mission is to create a more just society by building power and providing the quality of life in work-class and immigrant communities. So in Virginia, this is what we do, and I don't know what's going on right now with my screen. Let me see if I can.
And no, if you're having some technical difficulties there,
okay,
just let us know. If you want to email it, I'm also happy to try to share it from our side, whatever works best.
Okay.
And believe it or not, we are actually ahead of schedule. So we have a few moments. So thank you, and we'll definitely be patient.
But I don't think something's up right now. So I'm just gonna walk you guys through the presentation, even though it's not gonna be reflected in your screen. But why are we doing this? I feel like us as Latinos here in Virginia, we remember that 400 years ago, the first Black people was brought to our shore, and the first representational government was established in Virginia. But that didn't mean that all of the people were represented fairly. For example, women didn't have the right to vote. Black vote was suppressed until the 1965 Voting Rights Act. And what we're seeing here after Virginians voted for the Amendment 1, it is an opportunity to give back, to give the power back to people, right? So, so what are we doing? What are we utilizing this example right now with our groups? I was talking to one of our members earlier about the meeting that we have and how we're doing, how we're feeling, how him personally feel about joining our efforts here in the community efforts that we're doing here in the state of Virginia. And we were talking about our missions, our visions, and how impactful it is to develop leadership within our community, right? Within our Latino community. And so we were talking about how do we structure within our community, how we structure as a CASA in the state of Virginia. Well, we do have geographically, we have a building block of organizing structure. We organize geographically, and that includes new activists and existing members that they meet weekly, like around 30 to 40 people in different cities all over Virginia, right? The meetings are virtual, of course. And so where are we? Right now, we are in Fairfax County, in the city of Falls Church, Annandale, Springfield, and Alexandria City, and in the county of Prince William, in the cities of Woodbridge, Dumfries, and Manassas. We are in Winchester, Eastern Shore, in the counties of Accomack and Only. And of course, we are in Hampton Road area, Hampton Road County too. And what do we do? Yesterday, we had the opportunity to do outreach door to door in different cities in these counties. And we found out some common questions that we get while we were doing the outreach in our community. The questions there were very precise and very important for us because it was we were doing a little training that it turned really big into the redistricting. So some of the questions were, okay, so I already voted for it. Some of the voters were saying, okay, I already voted. What else should I get more? Why should I get more involved? Some others ask, what's next? What more can I do? And then this is where we explain that getting organized means not only getting informed, but taking actions by joining community meetings. For example, yesterday at 6:30 p.m., we were having our organizing team at CASA. We're having the weekly meetings in the Fairfax County, Prince William, Winchester, Accomack, and Hampton Road with different level of members that are actively participating in these efforts, right? And so the meetings are virtual. And this is where we inform and give our community members the tools that they need to develop leadership so that they can take action and mobilize if need. For example, like I mentioned yesterday, we had a training where we were able to connect redistricting to our issues, and to put it simply, how redistricting determines the representation process and how the process has a should impact on who runs for public office and who gets elected. And so at the same time, our community members have the opportunity to make sure that we plan to elect officials that advocate for our immigrant and working class families in the public safety, community funding, school policy, climate justice, and immigration issues. And I always mention to our members, other clear victories that our community were able to win. It's the driver privilege card, among other victories that the community were able to achieve by getting informed, organized, and mobilized, making sure we were delegating and working together with our elected officials to make that happen. So there is a different like tools, there is a different like methods that we're utilizing, but most importantly, what worked best for us, including even though we had the challenge of the pandemic, was to readjust everything from being in person to do the meetings virtually. Thankfully, we were able to adjust and develop leadership within our community to not lose the connection between the fight and the movement that we're trying to build here in the state of Virginia, right? And so that's something that I wanted to share with you guys a little bit of how we manage to keep our community members involved in what we do. And of course, I'm going to share with you guys the links for our social media, so that way you guys can stay connected and can contact me in case you guys want to be part of our groups in the counties that I mentioned before. So that way we can, like I said, like we can all learn from each other and make sure that we keep moving forward and make the Commonwealth a greater place, right? So, and with that being said, I'm going to turn it over to the panelists for if in case there's questions or something like. So take it away, please. Thank you.
Eduardo, thank you so much. And if you want to send any slides over, we'll make sure that goes out in the follow-up information, so everyone will have that.
I will. Thank you.
Perfect. So if there are questions from any of the participants, go ahead and stick them in that Q&A box that Daquan mentioned earlier in the session. And while we are waiting on everyone to type out their insightful questions, I would love to just do a really quick little round robin and ask a kind of general question. What can you talk about some maybe some organization obstacles that are unique to the communities that your organization works with? Jamal, why don't we start with you?
Well, what I would lift up in this moment is the ground game is going to be really important for redistricting this cycle, in part because of the unusual circumstances we face. We are all still climbing out of COVID. COVID-19 has really, crippled a lot of what would have been business as usual. But I want to put a pushpin in: business as usual is not always good for Black folks and for the Black community. And so when we think about the data coming late, meaning the data from the Census Bureau not arriving to us until, this summer / September, we're looking at this notion of, how the map drawing will then impact the electoral cycle. So just being ahead of the curve around engaging. And then the second thing I would lift up is that we're not expecting all of our members, advocates, and activists to be experts at drawing maps. So if you are on this Zoom, don't think that tomorrow you're going to have to get on Maptitude or ArcGIS and come up with these beautiful maps overnight and be a legal mind that has to go in and debate case law around whether. We just want you to understand the notion of what does it mean to have the opportunity to draw maps that include your communities, our communities, so that folks can have the opportunity to pick candidates of their choice. And so there's levels to this education thing. I know Gillian, for example, may be drawing maps, but everybody doesn't have to draw a map like Gillian. And so as we think about the trainings that we're going to continue to do with our leadership and with our local units, we want to make sure that folks are comfortable knowing you don't have to do it all, but we want you to understand this ecosystem and what's happening and what's at play so that we get it right. And then the last thing I'll lift up is the importance of our partnerships. Our relationships in community matter. We don't want to be fighting each other. There's the other side, even though we're nonpartisan, but there's another side that would love for us to not work it out locally and to not find a path forward. And so if we can work with organizations like CASA, who we work with Gustavo and others nationally, the notion is we can get it right so that the other side doesn't have the ability to dilute our vote through packing and cracking. And so for the NAACP, I think just understanding some of those nuances is really important.
Excellent. I will also mention, because we are also on our Facebook Live stream as well, we are monitoring those comments. So if you have a question and you're on Facebook Live, you can join us there. We actually reached capacity as soon as we started the webinar for today's program. And so we want to make sure that those folks that are on that side of the screen are also able to ask questions to get answered. I'm going to pitch the next question over to Kim with the Virginia Interfaith Center. You clearly have had experience, as we wait for other questions to come in, with working with various faith-based organizations in different groups. Could you talk about the importance of partnerships and building coalitions across multiple advocacy groups and different organizations? And I think you may be mute. There you go.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I unmuted you.
Okay. And I also wanted to address the first question that Liz did too. So I'll try and do both. She asked, what are some of the challenges in working with our particular communities? And I would say a challenge is that the vast majority of people who are active in their congregation have not really been trained much on advocacy. And most people really don't even know who their legislators are. I mean, when I wanted to do I wanted to do a letter writing campaign at my own congregation, I spent half the time trying to help people know who their legislators were, right? Because they didn't know. And so again, people aren't, they don't think that way. Most people have never written a letter or sent an email or so we really have to go back to advocacy 101 on it. And I think the second challenge is, it's both for most of us, our strengths are our weaknesses, right? So one of the great things about the faith community is its diversity. One of the challenges is it's really diverse, and every structure is a little different. Every congregation is different. The language is really different between various faith traditions, so there's just a lot to learn on that. In terms of partnerships, there's very few things that any of us can win alone. And so trying to figure out how we develop strategic partnerships that can not only work on this campaign, but can build the relationships for future work. And I think that's particularly important. I mean, it's probably important everywhere, but it's particularly important in Virginia, where we have such a racially divided history. And if we are going to ever have a Commonwealth that serves all of us, we've got to figure out how we build those relationships for the long haul. So I'm always thinking about partnerships as both, it's a strategic partnership for the moment, right? We got to get this vote and that vote. But really, it's about how do we build the relationships that will enable us to kind of create the, an economy that works for everybody, right? That serves us all and again, that we can all push together for. I just think that's critical. And so these partnerships are, just absolutely essential. So I'm so glad to be in partnership with you all.
That's great. And we're so proud and excited that you're with us, Kim. Gillian, I'm going to ask you this. There's been a lot of information that has been disseminated today about redistricting. We talked about what's redistricting, how it impacts our communities, why it's so important for us to be at the table. But the reality is that even for politicos like me, sometimes thinking about redistricting can be so challenging. It can be so nuanced and detailed. And so for the average organizer, or in your case, for our local NAACP leaders, what should they be taking away from today's session in terms of what we as the Virginia State Conference are asking of our units?
I think it's important to explain why redistricting is needed. But more important, the one point that stuck out, that came out the most to me, was the personal stories. You got to be able to make it relatable. Why is it going to make a difference in someone's life? They need to understand that this pertains to where they work, live, and play. Everything that they do, redistricting affects that. It's no different than voting. And so we have to make it personal. We have to make it relatable. This is an opportunity for us to hold forums, have one-on-one conversations, and we'll have talking points. I think everyone will get a copy of these presentations that we have today. But in terms of partnerships too, I think it's also important to partner with community groups. And I'm talking about grassroots community groups that are, they may not have that big name. You know, they might have an area that they might be important, that is important to them, might be environmental justice, it might be something else. To have everyone at the table, then you'll have whole, because I know all the advocacy groups that I know on the ground, they are all about equity. They're all about equity. And so if you have different people that are experienced and organizations that are experienced in all these areas, then you all can come together and talk about it, maybe hold a forum, and then you can talk about drawing your maps. And I think every branch should consider doing it as an exercise. You may not have to upload it, but just do it as an exercise to see what that would look like if you bring all the pieces together.
I think that's really critical. And I really want to highlight something you said there, is that branches should be working with other organizations in their community. I know that on a national level, we have many MOUs that NAACP has with our national partners. I see Jamal shaking his head there. But on the state level, we have some phenomenal partners that we work with. For example, OneVirginia2021. Now, I'll tell you this, last year, the NAACP did not have the best relationship with OneVirginia2021. We were at odds as it relates to our position on redistricting and that legislation. But now redistricting is here. I think it's really a great segment of the fact that we've been able to come together, because we do have the same values as it relates to nonpartisan redistricting for our communities. And so I would encourage, I really like what you said, Gillian, about our branches working with partner organizations. None of us can do it alone. I know at the state conference, we recognize we're not necessarily the experts. And so we're glad that Liz and OneVirginia2021 has been invaluable. With the Virginia Interfaith Center, I know that we have done some phenomenal work on our policy and advocacy work, our advocacy and policy work rather, with the General Assembly. So I am excited at the renewed commitments that I'm hearing now as to how we are going to work on the state levels to get our respective constituents connected together. And so I'm committed to that, excited about that. I know that I really enjoyed hearing from Eduardo and talking about his organization. And I'm wondering if he might be able to speak to how we might be able to create some relationships with some of the local affiliates with his organization, representing diverse Hispanic and Latino communities.
Of course, and like I just want to echo what everyone said about the inclusion and about working together, because redistricting is not only something specific. It's like pretty much how I see it. It's like the future of our life, right? Because it includes like climate justice, includes racial justice, include immigrant issues. So it's not only about immigrants, but about all of us, right? So something that I feel like that I would like to share, and something that I think that it can be very helpful now that we're going to be sharing, and now that you guys know that we are holding these weekly meetings with our community members. These are community members that somehow have been able to develop leadership and become more like actively within their community, right? And play some role of leadership by delegating or going out to the street, like to knock doors, to make sure that we recruit new members, to make sure that the new members are well trained, so that way they can train the trainers. So like I mentioned, we are doing this work with our teams in Fairfax County, Prince William County. We are in Winchester, Hampton Road, in the Eastern Shore area too, doing the same thing every week. We are doing the week. We are doing we're knocking doors, recruiting people, inviting people, talking about what's going on with our and how can we work together. It doesn't matter what color you are, what country you're from, if you're Latino, if you're Muslim, or the point is that because we became together, we were able to win driver license in the privilege card here in the state of Virginia. We were able to win the minimum wage. So that is a clear example that we owe the efforts, we owe what the community did, showing up, mobilizing to Richmond. We were able to actually win all these victories, and now as a result, it's like a better economy, right? Like our community is like actually getting more involved and knowing that becoming together will be it's the key for our future.
Excellent. That is truly excellent, and we're excited about that. I don't see any other questions in the Q&A, and so we want to be respectful of folks' time. So I will just do a quick round robin for closing thoughts, and maybe about a minute each. And we'll start with Eduardo. Why don't you start, and then we'll go straight to Kim, and then we'll close out with Vice President Watkins.
Sorry, for some reason I didn't hear.
Oh, just a minute or less in terms of closing thoughts.
Oh, no, like, again, I just wanted to thank you, everyone, for inviting us and to put up together this amazing event where we're showing the participant and the viewers that we want to work together. We know that this is really important, and that, I mean, if we don't do it, no one will do it for us. So that's something that I always like to highlight, and to invite everyone out there to get involved with our community. Get involved. It doesn't matter what issue it is. At the end of the day, all the issues are connected to one thing: justice. So that's something that I wanted to close with.
Thank you so much. Kim?
We are just in a great moment in Virginia. We have really made so many changes in the last couple of years. There's so many new relationships and so many organizations that are just stepping up to the plate and actually working well together. You know, I've been in several really significant coalitions, right? The Medicaid for All Coalition, the Minimum Wage Coalition, the Driver's Privilege Card Coalition. I mean, and frankly, people are really learning how to play nice together, right? We are building the kind of infrastructure that I think is going to build long-term change in Virginia. And nothing will be more important for our ability to do that in the long haul than a good restructuring process so that all of our votes count. So what you all are doing here today is so critical for us going forward. And I am so optimistic that we're going to make incredible changes together. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kim. Jamal?
Yes, I want to say again, thank you to the Virginia State Conference. It is important that we continue to highlight our relationships in terms of organizing, not only in the Black community, but with partners. And so when I think of, say, the Virginia Interfaith Center, we're in partnership with National Faith in Action, Reverend Alvin Herring and team. When I think about Common Cause, we work with President Karen Horbert Flynn and her team. Of course, with CASA, Gustavo and team are connected to our president and CEO, Derek Johnson. And so these relationships go beyond the state and have national implications. So we're proud of the organizing work that you all are doing. But I also want to lift up one important notion, is that racial equity is our focus. We will not bend, bow to anything less than. And so we're talking about map drawing, when we're talking about redistricting, we literally are talking about racial inclusion and racial equity. And that is our fight forward as an association, not only in the state of Virginia, but around the country. And so as we double down on the resources, the training, and the advocacy and the communication, we know that President Barnett, Chair Conorton, and Executive Director Love, and all of the branch presidents, state conference leadership, local units, college chapters are going to be fighting forward on this notion, because what happens in Virginia actually will affect what happens in the country. And so we're excited about this work, proud of this work, and looking forward to more organizing and advocacy to get it right. So thank you all for being in this space and doing the hard work locally.
Thank you so much. Our Political Action Chair, Gillian Conorton.
Great, thank you. I want to thank everyone for being on this Zoom today. I want to thank all of our wonderful panelists. You know, coming out of COVID gave an opportunity for what we already knew about the inequities, racial inequities. And so as highlighted, we passed, legislation was passed in the General Assembly that racism is a public health crisis. So this all pertains to this redistricting, because now what we have been advocating for, the COVID the pandemic has actually uncovered it to the highest level. And so let's use this as our opportunity to partner with other organizations and to really educate our members and educate our base on the importance of why redistricting is important, and include your local legislators too. Talk to them too. You know, talk to your local elected officials. You got to talk to them as well. You know, so this is a time for us to do some really good work, and this is a historic time that we're in right now. It's just amazing how with everything that's going on, we got redistricting right now at this time. And so let's use everything that we have learned to date to work for us and make sure that we have fair and equitable redistricting and lines are drawn properly. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Gayleen. And I'll turn it over to Liz White, Executive Director of OneVirginia2021, to close us out.
Great. Thank you, Daquan. Thank you. I just want to thank our panelists and all of our speakers for giving of their time and their expertise. I think this has just been, I've learned a lot. This has been an incredible session, I think. Thank you to the Virginia chapter of the NAACP. It's been a delight partnering and working on this event. I think it's been really great. So I think that what we've all come away with today, there have been a lot of changes in Virginia in the last few years in democracy reform in general and voting rights in general, and specifically in redistricting. Several different national watchdog groups have made lists of the states that are at risk for gerrymandering this year, and it's 20 to 25, depending on who you ask. And Virginia is, which is terrifying, but Virginia is conspicuously absent from that list. And I think that we can all be really proud of that fact. And even though there was a lot of back and forth about details and specifics of how we were going to move forward on this issue, the two things that have really come out of these reforms is the historic amount of space for public input and the opportunity we all have to fill that with our voices and with our advocacy. And then the levels of transparency at every part of the process, which helps us know what we need to be responding to. So I hope that we all have convinced all of our attendees that this nerdy little issue is of the utmost importance and worth getting involved on. Please let us know what we can do to make your involvement easier. One Virginia really strives to be a repository of resources and information so that no one else has to spend the amount of time on this one particular subject that we do. We're here to provide you with anything you want to copy and paste, borrow, just outright steal, it's fine. I'm gonna put a link in the chat to the Learn More section of our website. We have a partner toolkit with a lot of really great resources that we have compiled from groups like Common Cause and other national organizations. And there is a list of other really, really great resources. So national redistricting, Virginia-centered redistricting, it's a one-stop shop for anything you'd like to know if you want to learn more about this. So again, I just want to say thank you to all of you who participated, both on our panels and those of you who registered for this and attended. Thank you again for spending your Sunday with us.
Thank you and good night.
Good night.